Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our program today. My name is Henry Wehrmann. I'm co-chair of the Public Forum Committee, and today we have a program entitled "The Housing Crisis and Homelessness in North Texas," which I hope you will find to be of interest and stimulate discussion amongst yourselves regarding this important topic. We have a constellation of stellar speakers today. Ashley Owen Brundage, she is Chief Executive of Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity. She's worked with the United Way for 17 years. She's been Executive Director of Housing Stability and SVP of Community Impact. And she has led initiatives to address affordable housing and homelessness. We also have Brenda Snitzer. She is the Executive Director of the Stewpot, a ministry of First Presbyterian Church of Dallas, serving those in poverty and experiencing homelessness. It is in its 50th year, having started in 1975. Brenda has led the organization for 8 years, and in 2024, the Stewpot received the Trailblazer Award from the George W. Bush Presidential Center, from President George Bush and Mrs. Bush themselves. And last but not least, we have Mark Melton. He is a partner in Holland and Knight's Dallas office, where he is the national co-chair for the firm's tax practice group. Mark is also the co-founder of the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, which provides free legal representation to tenants facing eviction in Dallas County. Since March of 2020, the team at DEAC has assisted more than 20,000 families facing eviction. Mark's strategy is saturation theory, which aims to saturate every eviction court in Dallas County with highly trained eviction lawyers, is revolutionizing the way pro bono legal services are offered in the United States. And finally, to moderate this group is my fellow co-chair of the committee, Russ Coleman. Russ has served as general counsel for a Fortune 500 company and also for the parent company of the Dallas Morning News, and is chair of the Dallas Bar Foundation. He currently serves as chair of the Stewpot and is a member of the Dallas Bar Association's Public Forum Committee with me. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Russ, and I thank you for your attendance and attention. Super.
Super. Thank you, Henry. Each of you approaches today's topic from a different angle. Ashley from housing production, Mark from eviction defense, and Brenda for services to the homeless. How would each of you describe the current state of the housing crisis and homelessness in North Texas? Where are we making progress and where are we falling behind?
We're making no progress. That's the answer.
Please.
Yeah.
Speak up. Thank you.
And we're falling further behind. So if you look at just based on eviction data in the last several years, 18 months ago, when we looked at our client base, which is thousands and thousands of tenants a year, only 15% of them made above 200% of the federal poverty line. Today, it's 22% that make above 200% of the federal poverty line. So what we're starting to see is evictions are not primarily a function of the super poor. It's starting to creep up into higher income levels that previously it didn't. And so this idea of housing insecurity is really starting to expand beyond the very poor to normal working people that historically haven't had this problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have still yet to start addressing housing affordability like the crisis that it is. From a habitat perspective alone, we're about 16,000 homes for sale that are at an affordable level here in Dallas. And that is not something that we can address alone. And until we all start really moving forward and putting homes at different price points and different sizes onto the ground, the crisis is only going to worsen.
And I would say that it's not only an issue for folks that are becoming homeless, young people and the elderly are really at risk. And we know so many young people today are staying at home even after they get out of college and have a good degree and even have a sound employment, 60 to 100,000 are still not feeling like they can afford some of the housing stock or the apartments or condos that are available. And as I read some articles, one young man that's a 31-year-old real estate person said, he sees it as has always been the American dream, and less people in his age range to probably boomers are unable to afford a house. And as we know, housing is healthcare. When we have folks that are not housed, then their health is more at risk, not just their physical health and their mental health. And so those are really serious. Now, I am going to say a couple of good stats. There are some areas that we have improved on with the homeless response system. And so I am the chair of the All Neighbors Coalition that is a part of Housing Forward and the Continuum of Care, 150 organizations that are working together to try to improve homelessness. Ashley Brundage was a big part of that as well. In 2021, we kind of went through a reconstruction of the homeless services system. And so we are getting more people housed. But again, the problem is that it's flowing so many more people into the system that it's hard to keep up. So since 2021, we saw a 23% reduction in overall homelessness and 28% reduction in unsheltered homelessness. However, you are seeing so many people on the street, and even as we get people out of the encampments, there's still a lot of visible homelessness. And as Mark was sharing about the evictions of people that normally would be stable because of the price of housing, it is a crisis level, not just for housing, but also homelessness.
And one point on that, kind of interesting, if you think about what is the affordable housing crisis really, it's actually multiple crises. It's not just one big thing. So for example, young people being able to afford homes, most of those kids are not necessarily housing unstable. They're just renters because they can't afford to buy a home. And I've talked with a lot of people a generation or two older than me. They just think it's just young people being young people and irresponsibility, but that's couldn't be further from the truth. In 1975, the median home price in the United States was about 2.5 times the median household income. And today, the median home price in the United States is 6 times the median household income in the United States. So it's not that the kids are being kids, it's that buying a house costs 3 times what it cost the boomer generation to be able to buy a home when they were in their 20s. It's a very different landscape.
So super. It sounds like we've clearly identified the problem. We'll get into potential solutions later, but in the meantime, a question for Ashley about Texas zoning reform. It touches on some of what Mark was mentioning. Senate Bill 840. The legislature just passed a law, I guess it's become effective, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, September 1st, that allowing for multifamily housing and mixed use developments in commercial zones, and it's not statewide, but it has limited applicability, but heavy applicability in North Texas. So the question is, what does this mean, if anything, for affordable housing? Is this going to be a significant change?
I think it has the potential to be a significant change. So SB 840 really, it focuses on Dallas, Irving, Plano, McKinney, and Garland, I believe, here in North Texas, but it's your kind of 18 to 19 largest cities across the state of Texas where you basically can come in and put mixed use residential or multifamily housing in these commercial areas. So think like where you have your old malls, old offices, places like that that aren't being used anymore, or even just kind of open commercial land that hasn't been developed. This by right allows residential developers to come in and put some residential housing down of an affordable level without any rezoning battles, which is kind of the key there, right? Because rezoning takes forever and time is money for all of us. At Dallas Habitat, we think it's going to unlock some possibilities. So we can't put single family detached homes down on that type of area. It does not allow for that by right. But we are looking at how can we leverage this new law for townhomes and duplexes so that we can create some of that gentle density that's needed in the community to create the different types and sizes and price points of homes that we all need to see for affordability. I think overall for Habitat, land costs, and this is any affordable developer, land costs are one of our biggest challenges. So anything that we can do to acquire cheaper land, which this land typically is cheaper, will be helpful. And so we're hoping that we can take advantage of this new law pretty soon. What we are seeing is there are some of our smaller suburb cities are really fighting hard against implementing the law. So they're putting in different requirements that cause then the ability to put affordable housing into those areas difficult. So if you live outside of the city of Dallas in some of these cities, keep an eye on that, on what they're trying to do to make it more difficult for affordable housing, to help advocate against that with us.
Thank you. Anybody else can comment on the new law?
I love Ashley's characterization of gentle density.
Yes.
Which is a new buzzword. Please don't worry, it's gonna be okay. I am more of a vocal proponent for hostile density. I think we need more density, and we can get into the economics of supply and demand and what the housing market looks like. But at some point, we just got to look at our neighbors and go, sorry, we have such an emergency here that your opinion no longer matters. And we're just going to build, and it's just tough. Vote for me. Right? Probably not a great pitch, but it's true.
Okay, well, I'm going to call an audible here. I have a question that's come in online, and it's directed to Mark. As an extraordinary advocate for tenants and as a highly sophisticated tax lawyer, why has Dallas not attracted more opportunity zone capital for housing? And then the person goes on a little bit and talks about, I guess this has been sort of contemplated at City Hall, but the person says that the city has dropped the ball.
It's a great question. And I think you could ask it even broader. Why hasn't opportunity zone really taken hold throughout the United States? And the reason is opportunity zones are intentionally designated as places where no one wants to go. And that's the whole reason they are an opportunity zone, is we want to encourage private money to go invest and develop in places where private money would never, ever in a million years go invest and develop. And the problem with that is, even to the extent that you get some tax advantages, it's still not worth it a lot of time, because at the end of the day, you're going to build something, you need people to come live there. And these properties, I don't know that I can blame the city of Dallas for that necessarily, or any other city. It's just, it was a great idea and a good effort, but it hasn't really worked terribly well. So there was some expansion to the opportunity zone statutes in this most recent bill. We'll see if they have any impact, but it's very complicated. So it's not like you can just go build something. You're going to spend a lot of money on lawyers to make sure that you thread the needle to do it right, to get the tax benefit. But it's like every other subsidy that we push through the federal government and the tax code to try and get more low-income housing. It's never worked. It hasn't solved the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. It's not the answer.
Thank you. Okay, question for Brenda. As you know, courts allow cities to ban camping in public spaces. There were recent Supreme Court case of note about that issue, and restrict or limit panhandling. But our homeless neighbors, as you very well know, we all know, need safe places to go. How do we balance community concerns with the needs of the folks on the street, the homeless? That's kind of an open-ended question, I realize, but take a whack at it, please.
Yeah, so as we know, panhandling is, for the most part, should have limits, just like feeding folks on the streets. They both cause unintended consequences. For panhandling, it's dangerous if they're on street corners or in medians, and that's how they were able to enact this law. It's also, if folks are trying to help folks out, it can be dangerous if they are by themselves and don't know how the person that is seeking funds. On camping, I believe that it is important that we realize that there has to be places for folks to go. If you're just removing the ability for people to sleep out rough or on the streets, and we're not finding places for them to go, fines and jail time are not going to be beneficial. There needs to be compassionate solutions. And so what Housing Forward and the city of Dallas have tried to do, the All Neighbors Coalition, is really find ways to get more people housed as quickly as possible. And over the last, again, since 2021, started with rapid rehousing, trying to get folks that had just slipped into homelessness, but had the ability to get back on their feet, to have a process for that. For folks that are, have been sleeping outside for a long period of time and camping, a permanent supportive housing solution. And there's been initiatives like our Veterans Homelessness Initiative to get all of our veterans housed. We did actually achieve relative homelessness for, effective end of veterans homelessness last year. And recently, with a concentration of downtown Dallas, with all the organizations really working and partnering together, and working with the vouchers and rental assistance that we have from state and federal funds, then we were able to get all of the people from downtown Dallas housed. And so an effective end to downtown homelessness. Now, that doesn't mean you're never going to see anybody out sleeping on the streets in downtown. But we have some more mechanisms to get folks housed quickly. And we're trying to expand that throughout the city. And we've done a lot of encampments where we've gotten people out of the encampments into housing. And so that's a more of a compassionate approach than just saying we're going to ban or arrest people that are out camping. And so there's got to be solutions that are with the services and the organizations and the cities and funders all working together to solve this situation.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment on that? How do we strike the appropriate balance?
We're in a public place, right?
Yes.
So it's a controversial subject. We can talk about the end of homelessness all we want, but you can walk a few blocks that way right now, and you'll find plenty of homeless people on the streets.
Of course.
They're everywhere.
Sure.
It's not a smaller number, right? It just keeps growing. And so it's a huge problem. And the issue is one of scale, right? We have great programs now, and the rapid rehousing is extremely important because it is making a dent. But I think your point earlier, when you got the spigot going full speed and it's just blasting new people into the homeless system, because we're not making much smaller, much more impactful, effective investments in diversion programs, we can stop them before they go out the spigot. We have all kinds of ways that are much cheaper to keep people stably housed before they ever become homeless in the first place. We invest very little to no money in that. The entire country has gone to this crazy model that is absolutely nuts, which is we're going to start at the most extreme side of homelessness, where it is the most expensive intervention. And we're going to focus all of our efforts there, and we're going to push against the tidal wave until we get to the spigot. And logically, and just common sense would tell you that is a nonsense approach. What you should do is start on the other side of the spigot until you close it off, and then deal with all of this. You can do them both at the same time, by the way.
That's what I was going to say,
Yeah.
Mark, is you can't just
But
stop
no.
doing this.
But
We need to do both.
Yeah,
It's
but
the funnel,
Yeah, we don't do.
Okay, well, that kind of leads naturally and logically to the question I was going to ask you, Mark. So, what policy changes, state, local, federal, do you think would have the biggest impact in turning off that spigot?
We already know the answer. We did it during COVID, and it was rent assistance. So the federal government put $50 billion into rent assistance across the country. Eviction rates during COVID, everyone expected them to go crazy, skyrocket. They were about 40% of what they are today. So what happened during COVID was evictions did not go up, but they dropped more than in half. And one of the big reasons for that was because of rent assistance. People could get caught up. And landlords, by the way, in a lot of cases were more willing to be a little more patient because they knew there was a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. In Dallas, there was an economic group that did a study, just our work and defending tenants in courts. Their conclusion was we save for every 5,000 people we represent and keep them housed, even for short periods of time. We generate $182 million in net economic benefit to the community. We save taxpayers $40 million a year. It would only cost $30 million a year to give every one of those 5,000 people a $500 a month rent subsidy for 12 months a year. So we could, for 75% of what we're already spending, vastly decrease housing insecurity in the city for tens of thousands of people. But yet that's a conversation that we're never going to have because socialism. Until we can get past labels and have real conversations about real issues and real results, the problem's not going to get solved. But that's the policy answer is we did it, it worked, do that again.
Rent assistance, anything else? Or is that the 900-pound
Oh, yeah,
solution?
of course. No, I have a long list.
You got the long list. Okay.
I've read.
We have a little more time if you.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a big discussion going on right now, especially with 𝐧𝐿𝐴𝐿𝐼n's book Abundance,
Mhm.
about do you really address housing issues from supply side or demand side? And once again, the answer is and both, right? Not either or. He argues it's a supply side issue and that you really just need to build more units. And if you do that, equilibrium prices will go down, which is what you learn your second week of Econ 101. It's a little oversimplistic because there isn't one housing market. There are a lot of housing markets. You can build all of the $3,500 a month apartments you want. It is not going to have an impact on the pricing of apartments where people can only afford $1,000 a month. That is a different group of consumers and a different group of suppliers in each of those markets. So if we're going to address supply, we've got to do it with units that can actually be afforded by normal people. And so how do you do that? Well, the low income housing tax credit thing doesn't work because we give away all these tax credits. People build a 300 unit apartment complex and put in 10 or 15 units that are quote affordable. And even those aren't really affordable for real people. It's just a number on a page that's nonsense. So what we really do is you've got to maintain your existing housing stock below the market. It needs to be rehabbed effectively. And the private market is never going to do this, no matter how much you incentivize them. It is going to have to come from the government coffers. We don't ask private companies to build highways for us so that people can go drive on them because it doesn't make sense. There are certain things in our society that only the government can do. And unfortunately, we have proven to ourselves over the last 100 years that this is a place where government needs to intervene. They need to write the checks. They need to build the housing because it doesn't make any economic sense for the private markets to build it, and therefore they will not.
Thank you. Any person?
I'd say, I don't think we're advocating for projects to come back, but it's not wrong, right? We do need the government subsidies to be able to put into a building affordable housing. That is the only place that you're going to get the significant investment that's needed to keep the development affordable in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's single family homes or multifamily homes or renovating the naturally occurring affordable housing that exists down there. So we have to keep the government involved, but you also have to keep your eye on the ball on creating mixed income communities so that they are thriving communities moving forward.
And if you want to incentivize private sector players to do this, go look at how we do renewable energy tax credits instead of housing tax credits. Right? I can go build a geothermal system, save a bunch of money, and the federal government will effectively pay for half of it. And not in some crazy credit that I got to design a weird structure to go up to only Sierra interested banks. I can go sell those credits in the private market to literally anyone and monetize them right now. Why don't we do that with housing? You want the private market to do this, pay for half of it and make it really easy for them to get the cash.
I don't recall where, but I saw a video clip. I believe it was from the most recent legislative regular session of you testifying before a committee or I couldn't remember if it was the House or Senate. Do you advocate for these solutions?
I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Most of my time in the legislature in the last two sessions has been defense as opposed to offense. So while we're up here having this great conversation about ideas, these conversations are not really happening in the halls of power. What's happening in the halls of power is, and I can prove this because there's video. They're not having conversations about how to make it better for people. They're having conversations about how to make it worse. the conversations two such sessions ago where the city of Dallas and San Marcos and San Antonio passed city ordinances that helped tenants, that made it easier for people to stay housed stably. The legislature passed a rule that said you can't do that anymore. Okay, so they killed the beneficial policies. In this past session, they tried to pass a law that removed all tenant rights effectively with respect to eviction, would allow landlords to evict without trial, without any due process, and to defund any legal aid organization like mine that would dare to go defend a tenant in a court of law, because it should be easy to rubber stamp an eviction and just kick anyone out whenever you want, because that's the property owner and that is sacrosanct, and because tenants don't have any rights at all. So yes, I would love to advocate more for solutions like this, but the reality is no one has any ability to listen to these ideas right now. They are trying to make things worse, and we are stuck playing defense. And until everyone finally decides to have a real conversation, we're not going to make any progress in this state.
And that was just for tenants and housing solutions, or making it harder. That we were also, the Homeless Services Committee, or complex, whatever, was really having to play defense as well, because the legislator, there was all these different bills over the last two sessions that were trying to limit any organizations that were doing services for homeless folks, that they couldn't be within, at first it was 180 feet of a school. Then they did it a little further distance, but it still would have put most of the homeless services organizations out of service for the whole state of Texas. And so we kept advocating. It was a defensive posture, as Mark was saying. It wasn't anybody trying to come up with solutions. It was really trying to put us out of business.
Thank you for mentioning that, Brenda, really. And it was done on under the auspices of child safety for schools. But I remember the bill as originally proposed, and somebody had done a map, and what was within a perimeter of a school, but it basically would have eliminated the entirety of the city of Dallas for the provision of homeless services. It was unbelievable.
Because then they also not only added schools, then they added parks, and there, you can't go anywhere. I mean, most all of us in the city of Dallas that do services are somewhere near a park, and not like right across the street, but even there was a swimming pool across the street from Austin Street Shelter.
Yep.
That it would have closed down Austin Street, as well as the Stewpot that just moved over by Austin Street. And so, it's those kinds of people, and unintended, maybe they were going after one thing.
Those are intended consequences. Okay, don't be fooled by this stuff, right? They did it on the auspices of child safety. They tried to pass the eviction on the auspices of squatters, which, by the way, not even referenced in the bill. There is a narrative that gets passed every time they want to do something that sounds on its face like it makes sense. The reality is there's a whole lot of people in the state of Texas that truly believe if we don't provide any services to poor people, they will go away. If we don't feed them, they won't be downtown because there will be no reason for them to be downtown. If we don't house them, maybe they'll go to Portland. Right? That is a real thought, and that is the intent behind these bills.
Okay, well, realizing to use Mark's word, we have an open spigot. Dallas at the same time has been recognized for reducing homelessness, specifically in downtown. So a question for Ashley. To the extent you feel comfortable answering, if not passing it on to Brenda, what lessons should we take from those reductions? And what comes from, I've seen a lot of turmoil sort of as to what the federal government is going to do in terms of supporting this or not supporting that. But what's going on with the federal government that we need to be aware of that relate to our issues here?
A little bit of the success that we're seeing in downtown. And again, that doesn't mean that you're not downtown. But we've effectively ended it, meaning we're rehousing people within 30 days of them falling into homelessness, right? So they're not experiencing long stays of homelessness in downtown, which is great. The system overall, our rehousing system overall, is housing more people faster than we ever have before. And that's important to know. Yes, the spigot needs to be shut off. And yes, we have got to start investing in preventive care and preventive services to keep people from falling into homelessness. And I have always been an advocate of both, especially kind of falling in both. I serve on the Housing Forward Board and the All Neighbors Coalition Board, but then I run Habitat, which is affordable housing. they go hand in hand, right? Until we start building more affordable units, we are never going to end homelessness. We have got to have a place for people to live that they can count on and that they can afford so that we can end homelessness. The work that's happening on the federal level to change the way that we address homelessness is not the answer to the question, right? Like, it is not going to start focusing more on preventive services. It is literally like, how do we get rid of the permanent solutions that we know help people who are never going to be able to afford to live on their own, and just provide temporary shelter and hope that that's going to make everything better. And eventually it's going to go away. That's not how it works. It's just not how it works. If we divert resources from what we know is effective, which is permanent housing with supportive services, we will continue to move people off the streets and be successful at keeping them housed. I think Brenda can definitely add to what I'm saying, but I totally agree with what Mark has said too, that we also have to start investing in preventive solutions, but we can't move money from one thing that works to another thing. You have to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I would say one of the additional things that we've been working on, again, like moving up to, above the spigot, but also really the depth of some of the crises is our mental health and substance abuse issues, that we don't have places for those folks to go. And if we don't have we just started a complex needs assessment work group to really work on those 10, 20 people downtown that have complex mental health and substance abuse needs, and getting them housed in the wraparound services and all of that. Otherwise, if we don't start going depth as well as breadth, we're not going to solve the problem, because it will just mean more jails and more mental health or substance abuse facilities needing to be built, or shelters. And so you could say, let's build another shelter. Well, that one will fill up. If you're not trying to meet each person as they are and trying to get them where they're in stable housing and get then their needs met in other ways with case management. As I said, housing is healthcare. If we can get people housed, then we can address their mental health or substance abuse needs, then we are able to long-term keep them stable and keep them housed.
But we do need more mental health facilities.
We need that as well. It's a multifaceted approach.
I mean, we got hundreds of people sitting in the jail right across the highway over that have been waiting for more than a year in jail without a trial, because there's not a mental health bed for us to send them to get that help. So we're just incarcerating them.
Well, and I want to say a sad story. This past week, I was in our courtyard at the Stewpot, and there was a woman that was causing a ruckus. And this one staff member and I started walking over to her, and the security said, well, we'll just call the police. And I said, well, just give us a minute. We started talking with her. She was a regular, and she said, I'm just tired. Just barely 50, said, I'm tired. I need a mental health, hospital. She wanted to go to Green Oaks or somewhere else that could help her. She said, but I'm just gonna keep doing this until I get arrested and go to jail, because I'm tired of being on the street and being taken advantage of. We know women suffer more than men. Men suffer too, but if they're on the streets, they're more likely to be abused and taken advantage of. And she just wanted to be off the street. So she's ready to she was asking to go to jail. We were able to get her into a mental health hospital, but it was rare, because most of them, we called a number of facilities to try to find a bed for her. She just wanted some rest, just like the rest of us would want that.
Thank you. And I think if you Google this, you find out, but one of the local television stations, and I don't remember if it was WFA or one of the stations out of Austin, KXAN, did a long multi-purpose series about how people are with mental health issues are finding themselves indefinitely confined in county jails around the state. It's a huge statewide crisis of note. Besides mental health issues and the treatment that's needed for that, and substance abuse issues, what other pressing needs do people on the street have, Brenda?
One of the things that we do, and we help the continuum of care, is for ID services, because as you know, when people get either domestic violence victims, trying to get out of their homes quickly, or people that have been on the streets for a while may lose or have stolen their IDs. So then they cannot get back into housing and they can't get employment. And so one of the things we do is ID services, getting those vital documents, their birth certificate, the social security card, their Texas ID, so that they can be housed or employed. And sometimes we have to start with medical records or finding other documents to substantiate their identity. And so that's an important one. Transportation services, that's a big key. We started Austin Street, City Square and the Stewpot about 4 or 5 years ago, started the Connector, which is a transportation system for the homeless neighborhood services. And that's still going. Austin Street maintains that with support from the rest of us. But there's other transportation needed. When we were trying to find the place for the woman to go, we were able to call Right Care Services, which is a fire department EMT, a Parkland social worker, and a DPD officer. That is how she got to the mental health facility that we found. But transportation is a major issue for people that may be in the suburbs needing some of the services that are downtown. And so just getting them there. As I said, mental health and substance abuse. And of course, we've been talking about affordable options for housing, but also employment for folks on the edge and needing some resources there.
You want to talk a little bit about the job fairs that the Stewpot does, or?
So on our new campus, again, we purchased the City Square facility when they were going out of business. Workforce Solutions is on our campus. They are also at a couple of other locations like the Bridge Homeless Recovery Center. And so those are important resources and folks that know where there's going to be job fairs that are for folks that are at all levels of starting employment or able to take someone that has been experiencing homelessness. That's a big misnomer too, that people that are homeless are not employed. We have done a number of videos about some of our folks that were working full-time and homeless because they couldn't afford somewhere to live. There's many people at Austin Street or the Bridge that work full-time and are staying in shelter. And it goes back to the housing affordability.
Question for Ashley. Recently there was this Times feature that talked about robotic construction of homes. And it seems to be catching on. I mean, it seems like just reading this article, it talked about this outfit started small and they've just exploded. I know that really won't do anything for land costs, but do you think that robotic construction has a possibility of substantially reducing construction costs that can put a dent in the crisis we're facing?
Overall definitely has a place eventually in helping costs. I think what we're seeing right now, because we meet with these folks all the time that want to come and help Habitat and use our product and use our new innovation. What we have seen so far is none of it reduces the costs or the time it takes to build a house. And that's really where, if you are bringing me an innovation, or if there will be an innovation in affordable housing, that's where it's going to have to be, is how are you making my affordable housing even more affordable for me to build for everybody? Definitely reducing the time spent helps, but not as much as the cost of all the materials or whatever it is that you're bringing. A lot of like your kind of manufactured homes, modular homes, things like that are springing up too. The hardest part about those is the transportation costs of getting those modular pieces then to the sites. And so that kind of eliminates any affordability savings that you're seeing. I do think it's important for the industry to continue to innovate, because eventually we'll get to a place where more and more people are doing it and those costs will go down. But right now it's still land costs. It's going to be our biggest challenge that we need a solution to. I don't know that there's any innovations to cheap land.
Or to do it gently, as we're. So,
Or in desirable areas,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
then we can certainly put them out far away from the city, that then transportation
Right.
becomes the issue.
Right.
Mark, can you tell us a little bit more about your center? How you got started, what your goals are, how people can help?
Sure. So the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center is a nonprofit law firm. We currently employ 25 full-time employees. And we are in every single eviction court in Dallas County every single day, standing at the ready to represent every single tenant that walks into the door. Present, we actually represent around 75% of all of the tenants that show up for their hearings in court in Dallas County. You can compare that with pre-pandemic. The pre-pandemic rates of representation were less than 1%. So it's a pretty massive change. So in fact, tonight we're leaving Dallas to go to Houston for a few days because we are expanding in Houston. I guess officially this week, tonight, where we will try and duplicate this effort in Harris County, which has twice the problem that we have. So if you look at the number of evictions, it's always shocking to people to hear. In 2023, there were 38,000 evictions filed in Dallas County. In 2024, there were almost 50,000 evictions filed in Dallas. TBD on 2025. But it's a huge number. It's a growing number. More than 50% of the people that get sued for eviction are single parents, which means more than 50% of the people that are getting evicted are kids. That is the largest constituency of people being evicted are children that are 18. So it is not the deadbeat person that a lot of people have at the back of their mind. Most of our clients are working multiple jobs, trying to get their kids to school, just trying to make ends meet. And the decision usually comes down to, do I spend $100 to replace this tire so I get to work tomorrow, or do I pay my rent? Or my kids are sick and I got to take 3 days off because they've got a fever and can't go to school, and I'm an hourly employee with no PTO, and now I'm 3 days short of pay. That's what's happening to people out there, and their budgets are already so tight that any little bump in the road just throws the whole thing off kilter, and it starts a cycle that is, for most people, completely unrecoverable. By the way, we won 60% of our cases last year. It's a big number, you know. Like I said, this year we'll represent all 7,500 tenants in full eviction trials in 2025. So it's an at-scale solution that literally no one in the United States has ever done before and isn't doing now presently anywhere else. So it's kind of a one-of-a-kind innovative need that, by the way, is only possible because of how we insisted that it be funded. All these government programs that came down and have been there for decades that said, here's how we fund legal aid, and here's hundreds of millions of dollars to do it, are completely ineffective because of the way that they work. It is the government funding that is the problem as much as it is the solution. And we've got to reform all of that and take the handcuffs off the do-gooders that are out there trying to do the right thing. Because right now we say, here's some money. By the way, this is just for show. We're going to pass a bunch of federal regulations and you can't actually do anything with it. And that is true across the board in a lot of these social situations.
Well, and a lot of your government money too, families have to prove up that they're poor to be able to get the services. And that's where we need to change. We should not have to have our families show how desperately needy they are for some sort of government support to be able to survive in this country. So I think until we start investing in wages, till we start trusting our neighbors, we're not going to see the changes in policy that we see.
To the conservatives in the room that just heard that and went, nonsense, of course we only want to give to the poor. Let me make a more blunt statement. I get it. You don't want fraud in the system. Completely agree. Nobody wants fraud in the system. However, at scale projects require a budget for fraud. Okay. If I pare back a program so much that it doesn't do what I wanted it to do because I'm so afraid of this little tiny bit of fraud that happens around the edges, I'm saving the money from the fraud. Yes. I'm failing to do that much good though, to save that much. That makes no sense. So there's your logical, conservative, common sense answer for why you should just ignore that.
And we saw it work too. We saw with the CARES Act funding and the ARPA funding where the government did that, where they released all of the eligibility requirements as much as they could at the time, right? I mean, definitely they could have done more. Mark still didn't take their money, but It was so much easier than any other money you've ever received from the government before to be able to get people eligible to receive like the rental assistance that we were doing. So we know that it can be done and we know it's successful and we know that the amount of fraud was very little coming out of that. And we have got to continue to do that with our other programs.
I want to make sure y'all know that we also do programs for folks experiencing poverty, and that are housed. And our children, youth and family program has been very successful for over 52 years. They actually predate the Stewpot and they just were incorporated into the Stewpot programs. And the majority of our young people, because we're helping families with those other costs so that they can afford rent or new tires. We do food stabilization, food pantry, and we do clothing, and we do other forms of assistance. And then we help with scholarships for our young people to go on to college or higher education or vocational training. And the majority of them are coming back and helping change the generational poverty for their families, helping get cars, buy homes, get their siblings into college, all of that. So those kinds of things, as you continue to work and bring about programs and assistance, and what brought that on is that we were doing rental assistance for those families, particularly when COVID happened, and we then broadened it and continued to get more and more funding to keep people housed. Since we've been at the new campus, we're able to do our food pantry. Again, no restrictions on zip codes. A lot of food pantries have zip code limitations, maybe because of their funders or the resource where they get their food. We have no zip code limitations. And so we have people from all over Dallas come. So we're happy about that. Unfortunately, we are serving more and more people than ever before because there is so much need and because people are falling behind, as Mark said. And so getting food might be middle income families, but because of the housing costs, they're needing to get food to be able to survive. So we're serving 260 people a day, Monday through Friday, in our food pantry. And so it's those kinds of services that we're able to do to help those families in poverty to stay housed. And those are important resources.
I got a question for the two of you. Obviously, both your organizations do really tremendous work. Have you ever had a situation where you had too much money that you did not spend it?
Yeah.
That ever happened to you?
No.
No, that never happened. All right. And the point I really want to make here is that, so what's the policy solution? The policy solution is write a bigger check. Obviously, you want to be intentional about where you're spending that money, but at the end of the day, it is going to require more money. We have all these things that we have done in Dallas that have been great. And they have really moved the needle. And all that means is if we didn't do that today, things would be so much worse than they are. They are not good, though. And if we want to make them good, we are going to have to allocate a lot more money and put it into things that we know that work. If you haven't figured out, I am not the silver lining to your life. I am the cloud.
Yes.
I will say yes, and more money, but also volunteer time. And I know that Habitat operates because of volunteers. The Stewpot does as well, and so many other organizations. And we use 40 people a day doing our pantry. We use 15 people every meal service. We do meals at the Bridge Recovery Center, and that's all. We run the whole cafe and everything. 15 people every meal service, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 365 days a year. And so using your time also extends our dollars so that we're not having to use staffing, which is the biggest cost of our programming.
Thank you. Well, you've kind of answered partially. Maybe we can go around one more time with the panelists for additional ideas. But a question from the online audience is, what are some action specific steps that ordinary citizens and attorneys can do to help? We've identified funding and we've identified volunteering. What else?
I think being informed, educating others, advocacy, as Mark said, watch the legislature, because there are people that are trying to the demise of some of our organizations and the services that we do. So being informed and educating others, volunteering, those are the things I would say.
I think the answer is different for the lawyers versus what you refer to as the ordinary citizens. At least in my world where we represent tenants, you kind of need to be a lawyer to do that effectively. So for the lawyers, and by the way, we don't use volunteer lawyers in eviction courts because they lose. Unless these things take, we timed them 3 minutes and 59 seconds on average is the average length of eviction trial. And oftentimes the judge is as much your adversary as the landlord. And so unless you are deep in the weeds on the law around housing and eviction, and you know exactly which case to cite to the judge and which subsection in the property code to refer the judge to let them know that you win, you lose. Which means a regular lawyer, no matter how talented they are, unless they're doing it every day, they just don't have the firepower to be able to win. So we don't use them at all. We would love to have lawyers volunteer to take appeal cases. There were 3,600 of them filed last year in Dallas County alone. Almost none of them have lawyers. So there are a lot of room to take appeals in the county court of law. For ordinary citizens, I think your time is probably better spent going to the Stewpot or building a house with Ashley. Because again, the things that we do are represent people in court. I do have a lot of research projects because we are heavy into data. And I need people pulling data and compiling data, economists all over the country to try and solve this problem at scale. And so I always need more bodies to pull data. That's something that we could always use volunteers for. Unfortunately, that means I have to organize them a lot of the time and I'm the bottleneck. So that's the real problem.
I wanted
Be
to,
honest with yourself.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I would say just from a habitat perspective, a couple of things. One, the Dallas Bar Association has a habitat house committee that is raising money every year to build a house on behalf of DBA. So please give to that, come out and build with us and join your fellow attorneys in doing so. Definitely for general population, giving and volunteering are always important to us. And I would say volunteers are kind of the heart of the Habitat mission. I was talking to an attorney that stopped by earlier who's volunteered with Habitat for 35 years. 35 years. We're only 4 years old. So we definitely love our volunteers and need them long term. The last thing that I would say is to just really spend time learning more about the issue and really considering the fact that nobody wants to live in a destitute house or a falling down house. Nobody wants to live on a street. People are ending up in these situations because of other external factors in their lives, but they are still your neighbors. They are still somebody's family, somebody's mom, somebody's dad, somebody's sister or brother. They still need help. They still need to be treated like the decent human beings that they are. And they need a little bit of support to help right their lives. And we all have got to remember the humanity that exists around us. And even if they are in the worst situation of their lives, it's probably the most important time for you to remember that.
One other thing, I have now grown children and starting to have grandchildren, but we are doing all ages events at the Stewpot, things that, and so we just recently had one. So if you have children that are younger, but you want them to serve and learn, or you have grandchildren or nieces or nephews, reach out to me because it really is wonderful when families serve together and teach the next generations to serve. And we got so many compliments about that because there aren't that many places for kids under 12 to serve. And so please reach out to me, and we do those on the weekend.
that would be a great place to end. And that is actually what I had planned for the ending question, but we do have a few more minutes. If there's any questions from folks in the room or from folks online, and I do want to thank the person online for that question. Anne, please, yes.
They got the biggie. They currently run greenhouses.
Folks online who might have not have been able to hear the question. The question concerns rooming houses and co-housing.
It's actually a nonprofit that's shared housing. That if you do know people are looking for roommates, that's the type of work that they're involved in. I don't know, is Maria still the CEO?
I think so, but I think it's transitioning, but Stow's Shared Housing, and they might have changed their name.
And then kind of group home type thing, is that what you said?
Back in the day, they used to have rooming houses.
Boarding houses, and there are some.
Boarding
there are-
houses.
Vanished, as far as I can see.
I know Volunteers of America does some, but specifically for reentry, so people coming back out of prison, they have group homes that I was meeting with their CEO this morning, and they're in desperate need of funding for, because they are running out of room and space in those, so it'd be worth reaching out to Volunteers of America about that. I think it's one of those things, especially like the SRO model that has gone away, the single room occupancy model has gone away, that we all just decided that that wasn't gonna work anymore, that we do need to look at bringing back. I do think that there are people who would enjoy that model and want to choose that model. On the coasts, you see a lot more shared housing types like that are not super affordable, but it is still kind of that co-housing where they're sharing shared spaces, living spaces, kitchen areas. It's definitely better for our environment, something like that, because they can share then baby toys, all that plastic, things like that. So it's a model that needs to be explored more here, but it has not really taken off.
And if you give me, I'll give you my card, because there are some boarding houses and there are, that we refer to and have some of our neighbors that are staying in, so we can talk further.
Thank you. Was there one more question, please?
Then to the cycle of houses toxic black mold that poisoned me and my family. Doesn't matter if I paid $5,700 a month or $12,500 a month. The houses consecutively were ill-maintained by landlords. My husband died of brain cancer. Me and my children got very sick, had to spend $1,000 a year detoxing. No recourse for the landlords. So I'm just curious, what measures are there out there with anybody, any governing authority over these landlords to maintain their homes, keep them safe for residents?
Procedures, what are there to make sure that the housing that is provided is safe, from a personal health standpoint?
Not many, is the answer. Part of the issues is, if we go back to Austin, to our legislature, there are numerous examples in the property code where it says the property owner cannot be liable for X. And all of those laws came about because some poor tenant sued a landlord and won at some point, and then the legislature said, no more of that. Again, property ownership is sacrosanct, and it must be protected at all costs. There is no one looking at safety. You can call code compliance with the city. They'll come out and maybe they'll write a ticket, maybe they won't, it depends. But I tell people all the time, this is actually, if you look at it from a macro perspective, a bigger issue than you think. And not as clear cut as you think. I've got into a lot of fights with a lot of city's attorney about pulling COs from apartment buildings that no one in this room would want to step foot in, much less live in. And the city would come in and say, well, this is terrible. The toilet's gone and there's just a hole in the ground. There's black mold everywhere. This is unsafe. We got to get people out of here. And I would argue against that and say, do not do that until you can show me where you're going to move all of these people.
At the same rent.
At the same rent. Because what we do is we go in and we say safety first, shut it down, and our housing supply goes. There's nowhere to put them. So is it better for them to be in what we would consider what likely is an unsafe condition? Or is it better to have them under a bridge in a tent? Because if we shut down every apartment in Dallas that had black mold, unfortunately, it would literally put hundreds of thousands of people. This is not like that one apartment has it. It's in every Class C apartment in the city. All of them have black mold. And I've been in most of them and seen it personally.
Super, thank you. We have, I think, 1 minute left. Is there any, just topically, is there any topic that we have not addressed? Call it a subtopic under the topic of housing.
Yes.
Affordability and question. Yes. And what would that be, please?
Well, we only have 1 minute. So, no, there are lots of other issues, subsidies around people, around the prevention side of the conversation, I think, more than anything.
Okay.
But we're out of time, so you don't get your.
There you go. And the solution, we've talked about the spigot, sort of the analogy I've heard a lot of times is we as a society are very good about having an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff to collect people. We're not very good about having people, reasons for them not to fall off the cliff. So let's see. This is a CLE. I've been asked to repeat the CLE number for the benefit of people online. That number is 174-295-392. Again, that's 174-295-392. And if you would please join me in thanking our panelists. Brenda, Howard.